Hello and welcome to my presentation on risk and resiliency of foster youth. My name is Sara Rowley. So who are foster youth? Foster youth are children who are under the age of 18 who have been taken from the custody of their parents due to an investigation being done and it being determined that their safety could not be guaranteed. So if they are taken from the custody of their parents, where do they go? So ideally, they are usually there's usually efforts made for them to go to relatives. And then they could also end up in group or individual foster homes for many different lengths of time. It could be a week, it could be years until they age out, just very varying degrees. They could also eventually end up being adopted. And then there is also the possibility that they could be reunited with their biological parents. This would usually require the biological parent to make a lot of changes to the situation that was an issue and be able to convince a judge that they can guarantee their child's safety under their care. So how prevalent is it for children to be placed in foster care? Well, a study that looked at data from the year 2000 to 2011 found that 1 in 17 children in the US had been in the foster care system for some length of time. So again, that could have been really short time or it could have been a really long time until they aged out of the program. I was really surprised about how prevalent it was. That was more than I thought. So in terms of race for demographics, by age 8, Native American and African American children were found to be nearly twice as likely to be placed in foster care than white, Hispanic, Latinx, or Asian children. In regards to gender, a study conducted by Wildman and Emmanuel found that females were found to be slightly more at risk than males to enter into the foster care system, but they did acknowledge that it was not a significant difference, so it was really close to being equal. And then I want to acknowledge that this is the results from this study are in contrast to what was normally previously found. It's normally found that males are more likely to be placed in foster care than females. So I'm not sure if this study is an anomaly or if it signifies some kind of shift or not. That's what this study shared. Infants are found to be placed in the foster care system at much higher rates, much higher rates than children of any other age. And this is usually due to the close contact that hospitals have with mothers, and if they will report a mother for abuse if they find drugs in her bloodstream, hard drugs in her bloodstream, because that could harm the infant. So that's considered abuse. It could really harm their development. So and also sometimes mothers know, pregnant women know that they don't want to keep the infant. So they make arrangements ahead of time to put the infant up for adoption once it's born. had that trade-off kind of happen right away. So looking at socioeconomic status, low income and impoverished families are much more likely to have CPS called on them and to have their children placed in foster care placement than in, the higher income class levels. And then looking at sexual orientation, LGBTQ foster youth make up 30% of the foster youth population, and those in unstable housing. And they make up about 11% of the general youth population. So we can see that they are highly overrepresented in the foster youth community. So looking at the risk factors, using Bronfenbrenner's ecological system, on the micro level, foster youth are found to have a history, a history of sexual abuse at much higher levels than children of the general public. And of foster care youth, they are found to have a much higher rate of exchanging sexual acts for something in return when they're in their adolescent and young adult years. And this can this can put them at further risk for physical abuse or exploitation. As far as the mesosystem goes, a lack of training for effective discipline being given to foster parents has been found to have really negative effects for foster youth within their care. They exhibit higher rates of mental health issues, behavioral issues, and lower success rates academically. On the exosystem level, child welfare programs not having very clear rules and roles for everyone during supervised visitation, which is when the biological parent visits the child in foster care. So unclear rules around that time for the biological parent and for the foster parent and for the social worker can cause these visitations to happen to a much less degree, and can also cause make it more probable that there will be some kind of relationship issue or relationship tension between the biological parent and the foster parent. Which ultimately means that the foster care child, the child in foster care also has a negative experience, can have negative experiences. On the macro system level, foster youth who were found to internalize mental health stigma were found to use mental health services after they aged out to much lower degrees, which is an issue for them because they could, they've been through a lot and they could really benefit from utilizing these services. On the chronosystem level, aging out is a very important part of foster youth's lives. And they usually do not fare as well in comparison to youth in the general public who are going from being a child into transitioning into adulthood. Former foster youth are at this time are seen to have higher rates of experiencing homelessness, experiencing more mental health issues, higher levels of mental health issues, higher rates of drug use, and higher rates of unemployment during that time in their lives. So looking at protective factors in the ecological systems, On the macro system level, foster youth that reported having higher levels of self-esteem and more positive social skills were seen associated with them graduating high school on time at higher degrees than foster youth who reported in the reverse of that. On the mesosystem level, foster parents who received effective discipline training were found, the children in their care were found to have higher rates of mental health and lower rates of behavioral issues, and higher rates of academic success. So that was a really, really big protective factor for them. Exosystem level, very clear rules and clarity around everybody's role during supervised visitation really showed positive results for the relationship between the biological and the foster parent, as well as the child's experience. Macro system level, foster youth who had a positive view of mental health and thought that it was something that is actually helpful to them, saw it as a resource that they could just go to and utilize if they really felt like they needed it. They were found, to maybe no surprise, that they were found to utilize these services at much higher rates after aging out. So in the chronosystem level, foster youth entering into higher education is not common. It's much less common than youth of the general public. So some researchers got together and they found foster youth who were in higher education, and they interviewed them and they asked them, one of the questions that they asked them was, what do you believe was a really big factor in you making it this far? You know, what helped get you here? And an overwhelming majority of them said that educational staff, either in high school or at the college that they were at, going the extra mile for them and helping them in some way, and figuring out how they could help them in some way, and also encouraging them to continue to reach their goals and to go for goals. They said that really played a big part for them. So that be a protective factor as well. So a general overview of current research in regards to the foster youth population. So physically, foster youth are shown to have less white matter growth in the areas of their brains that are known for helping us with sensory input and processing. They are also found to have greater levels of delays in memory retention, problem solving, and attention control. Psychologically and emotionally, they are found to have higher rates of delays in emotional and behavioral regulation, and higher rates of anxiety, distress, and depression than youth in the general public. So the first intervention that I'll talk about is called the LIGHT program, and it is meant to support foster youth in processing their grief, and it can be grief from a death-related loss or a non-death-related loss. And what they do to support them is that they facilitate weekly meetings that a group of foster youth attend, and they get to lead the discussions, and it's facilitated by trained adults who are there to just sort of help the conversation along and being constructive for processing grief and loss. So the study that was conducted for the LIGHT program investigated its effectiveness, and had a sample of 42 foster youth that were from 3 foster homes in the southern east area of the United States. They were ages 12 through 16. The participants' race, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic status were not shared. Procedure how they went about it was so they split the group of foster youth into 2. They divided it in half, and half of them went into a waiting group, a waiting list, excuse me, and then half of them began engaging in the program. And the foster youth in the waiting program did eventually get to participate in the program too. They just wanted to see it and kind of compare if there was a positive effect. So for the foster youth who participated in the program for 6 weeks, they met once a week for 90 minutes. And they discussed, in their groups, they discussed grief and what they were going through. And there was orientation, pre and post assessments, and exit interviews conducted to collect data from the foster youth, or on the foster youth, from and on the foster youth. Results showed that there was an increase of reported levels of self-esteem, self-worth, feeling socially supported, and feelings of hopefulness. Another goal of the program was they wanted to see, they were hoping to see a lowering of challenging behaviors in foster youth externalizing their emotions, and they did not see a difference in that. So the second intervention is the CASA program, and they help foster youth with getting their wants and needs met. And they do this by assigning an advocate to foster youth, and that advocate gets to know them and they meet with them regularly. So this study wanted to know the effectiveness of the CASA program in terms of permanent placement of foster youth. So they looked at 304 foster youths, and so the sample comprised of about half being male and half being female, and then 275 being white and 29 being non-white. Their ages ranged from 0 to 19. They lived in Tennessee, the state of Tennessee in the United States. Their socioeconomic status and sexual orientation were not reported. So how they went about this research is they compared placement outcomes of the 304 foster youth who had been enrolled in the CASA program and who had not. And then they also compared the types of permanent placement outcomes for foster youth that had been enrolled in the CASA program. And so the results were that they found that CASA participants had higher rates of adoption, while non-CASA participants had higher rates of reunification with their parents. Both enrolled and not enrolled participants showed similar probability rates of never obtaining permanent placement. So the author conclusions on this were, for the LIGHT program, they felt like it was effective for helping foster youth in terms of their social emotional well-being, and they did get a lot of positive feedback in the exit interviews about foster youth sharing that they did think it was really helpful for them and a positive thing that they experienced. So they felt like, yes, this program should continue to be used. It's effective. And for the CASA study, the authors showed support for the program, and they felt like it did have a significant did play a significant role in securing permanent placement for foster youth. So my own personal conclusions on the programs are, for the light program, I did think that they did show some really good improvements for foster youth around processing grief and supporting their social emotional well-being. However, I think a suggestion that I would have is for them to possibly add a reflective practice and informational classes about behavior and emotional regulation. I think this could help the foster youth a lot and help the program meet their goal of reducing externalizing behavior. In terms of the CASA program's effectiveness, I didn't quite make up my mind. I think I would need to see more studies around its effectiveness on permanent placement. I wasn't really impressed with the participants and non-participants having this very similar levels of never obtaining permanent placement. So I know that that's not the only thing that CASA provides for children and does for them. So of course, I would say yes, continue the program in other ways and stuff. It seems to be very effective. I am wondering if maybe they could improve in the area of securing permanent placement for foster youth, if that is one of their goals. And yeah, we'll just be interested in seeing more studies around that. So this is my video for the about a girl. She shares her story for the of going through the foster care program. So we're just gonna watch that really quick. Okay, so at this time, I was gonna ask if a few people wanted to share something either in the video or in the PowerPoint in general, something that stood out to them. So that was my plan for that. And then these are my my references. You can see them here on this. It's a lot of pages. So yeah, that is my presentation, and thank you so much for listening.